Good evening, everyone. I'm one of the few on the screen who's still active in the planning community and the housing and community development community. It's got a little piece of water in it. Let's see it straight up. And I have agreed to come and be the scapegoat here. I'm not sure exactly what role I'm to play, but whatever it is, I'm game, all right? I am an urban planner. I was, at the time that the film was made, I was a staff person in the Houston Planning Department. I remained there for 15 years until 1988, and for the 30 years to almost to this day, I've been an urban planning consultant, very involved still in the neighborhoods that you have seen depicted on screen. And unfortunately, I have to say to you that very little has changed in those neighborhoods, and a lot of the predictions that were made have come true with respect to the housing crisis deepening. When you drive over in the Third Ward off of what is now Emancipation Avenue, which was at the time called Dowling Street, you will see that as you go toward downtown on the west side, there are $300,000-$400,000 townhomes juxtaposed right next door to very deteriorated single-family small housing units. It's just the most incredible thing. Some of the predictions that were made about if we don't do something, it's going to be really awful. I think that the outcomes have been even more dire, certainly, than I anticipated. Some of the things that I said, I don't know if you recognize me because that was a long time ago, but some of the things that I said were really mild. The outcomes that I predicted have been, what's happened has been a lot worse. I never would have thought I'm a native-Houstonian, by the way. I never would have thought in my lifetime that I would see the kind of homelessness that we're experiencing. People living under freeway bridges. I never would have thought. When I was a little girl growing up, there was only one person that I was aware of was homeless. His family would bring him to sit outside of what was a Wine Garden grocery store in Third Ward on Alameda all day long. And others may remember that. He didn't have any legs, and so they would sit him there, and he would beg all day long. He's the only homeless person I ever had any contact with. I will be 70 in February, and so way back then, we just didn't see. Nobody lived under the freeway bridge, and now we have that, and the housing. You notice the prices that they talked about, $100 a week or whatever. Well, now you can't touch a rental unit for anything in that neighborhood. You can't touch a for sale unit for anything in the neighborhood of what the for sale units went for back in the 70s when the film was made. So I don't see, there's not a lot. I'm still very deeply involved with affordable housing and with community development in low, moderate income neighborhoods. And there's just still a big problem with poverty and affordable housing. There are some organizations that are addressing it. There's a group that meets every month called the Housing Collaborative. I tried to get a bunch of them to come and be in the audience, but it's Sunday and it's bad weather and all that. But I'm going to make sure that that they become aware of this and that this gets shown. There are people who are still addressing these issues, but there don't seem to be enough resources. We are about to get $1.2 billion in disaster recovery money to come into the city. And that will help somewhat, but that's just the neighborhoods that flooded. There's still a lot of low moderate income neighborhoods that didn't flood that just don't ever seem to be enough resources to address the problem of ill-housed people. I didn't realize we didn't have a fire code until, whatever year that was. I mean, that's just absurd. A lot of the people in this film, I knew them, I worked with them for over the 15-year period that I was there. I knew that Dave Johnson, who was on the screen, used to always say that if he really strictly enforced the housing code, that the homeless problem would be even worse than it was because then people wouldn't have anywhere to live. At least they had a roof over their heads. Back, when he was kind of looking the other way, and he did talk about that. I thought he was pretty frank about the fact that he was responsible for enforcing the housing code, but he realized that if he really stringently enforced it, there would be a lot of people on the street.
So,
any questions?
Sorry, watching this film, I was really struck with sort of a sense of deja vu, where if you changed the clothes, you took away the mustaches,
yes,
right?
Yes,
you could have filmed that last year.
I had exactly the same sense. It was like, oh my gosh, Brays Bayou. I didn't realize it was flooding back then. I don't recall that, but you're absolutely right. I had a sense of deja vu all over again. It's like not much has changed.
Can you recollect at the time just any memories you have of James Blue and Adele Santos around the period this was made and how you connected?
Yes. I remember us sitting in a little Mexican restaurant over in Montrose talking about these problems. There was one incident where they came and they filmed me, and I was really very passionate and fiery about whatever the topic was, this topic, and they lost the film. And they had to come back, and at that point I wasn't able to recapture the same level of passion that I had on that occasion. But it was really good times. I was sitting here thinking, we need someone to come back and redo this, because so little has changed. We need a James Blue and an Adele Santos to come back and revisit this issue, because I swear that I was sitting there thinking, oh my gosh, so little has changed, actually, and so much has gotten worse. So it was very distressing for me.
You have a question back there?
And if you could stand up.
Yeah.
I'm the principal of a charter school in the Heights, and my kids all come from North Side, North Central, and so I go into the neighborhoods, and it's still the invisible city. It's truly shocking to me that it truly could be made again, just right now. My question to you is, who was the mayor at that point? Who was on city council? Was it anybody approachable?
Louis Welch, wasn't it?
Well, Louis Welch was the mayor at the beginning of it, but then we got Jim McCann, because Louis Welch was the mayor. I started in August of '73, and I believe in '74, Jim McCann became the mayor. So I started, and I was there at the tail end of Louis Welch. The city council did not have single-member districts at the time. Single-member districts came later. And I could say there's been a marginal difference on the positive side as a result of single-member districts, because you don't have to really fight everybody in the whole city for the money that comes to the districts at this point.
So I see one over Carlos. Could you stand up so they can hear you back?
In the 1980s, I think in the mid-80s sometimes, we had the establishment of the tiers, right?
Yes.
And then the management districts.
Yes.
The Greater Houston Downtown Management District is raping my community.
What community?
Second Ward.
Right.
Second
So
Ward,
North
Side.
Yeah.
So here's a management district that tries to develop business and development interests in a community to help the people. Yet the people are the ones that they are being that they rape and disregard and only help the developers. They even came up with a name called Edo.
Yeah.
Hey, wow, look at all that development in Edo. And I confronted the mayor, Mayor Turner. I said, what is this name Edo? Even my council member, Robert Gallegos, uses that word. And I said, that word doesn't exist. It has no basis in any kind of historical fact.
Yeah.
It's a word that you guys made up so that the developers can say, hey, welcome to Edo, the great new development of Houston.
Can't argue.
It's
Can't argue that.
So our political leadership, now we have Mexican-American council members, we have black council members, we have, but yet, as far as I can tell, they are doing nothing except lining their pockets. I'm sorry, but please comment on tiers.
Yeah, I would like to, TERSs and management districts have actually been my clients. I try to work on the side of the angels, and I try to get those entities to do good in the neighborhoods, and by and large, they really are working toward that goal. The downtown management district is about, working on behalf of downtown. Now, if we don't have a strong downtown, in my view, I think we need a strong downtown, okay? And the downtown management district wasn't created to deal with Second Ward per se, but I'm sure there are some impacts. There was a neighborhood that showed up on the screen that is now being called Edo. And when it showed up, I said, oh, that's the thing they're calling Edo now. That neighborhood used to be, actually, when you drive around that neighborhood on a Sunday morning, you will see some of the original inhabitants of it in the little houses. They haven't been gentrified. I hate that term, by the way. I hate that term. They haven't been gentrified out. But one of the first things that happens is that neighborhoods get rebranded. When it's time to gentrify, neighborhoods get rebranded. I'm told that Sunnyside is even being called some cutesy name right now. It's like, but yes, that's one of the first things that happens. I don't know I don't want to sound self-serving, but one of my clients is the Midtown Redevelopment Authority, and they are TERS, and they have bought like 630 parcels of land in the inner city so that affordable housing can be put on those parcels of land, and no one else has done that. Okay, it's really, if you don't control the land in Houston, Texas, then you have a very slim chance of forestalling gentrification. But in that neighborhood, in the Third Ward and in the Palm Center area, there are like millions of square feet of tracts of land that have been purchased for the purpose of building affordable housing. We need more of that. That can't just happen in Southeast Houston, South Central Houston. That needs to happen all over Houston. Now, there is a movement to do community land trusts at the citywide level. There's a movement there's something called LARA that's been in existence for a while, the Land Assembly Redevelopment Authority. Those are two entities that are about land banking so that because if you don't control the land, the costs are going to go up and up and up, and you won't be able to put an affordable house on it. Midtown has been buying land for a decade in order to forestall gentrification, but they're starting to come up against high land prices. And so if they don't continue to work really, really fast, even Southeast Houston will be completely gentrified. I don't really understand the dynamic that's occurring across the country with respect to people moving back into the inner city and so-called gentrifying neighborhoods. But it's happening everywhere. The only way to forestall it is for some entity, either a governmental entity, or like in the case of the Midtown TERS, to buy land and bank it for affordable housing. Otherwise, market forces will continue to cause gentrification. The reason I don't like that term is we're supposed to be a democracy. We're not supposed to have a gentry. That's what Britain is about, right? So I don't like that term, but I'll use it because everyone understands it. Gentrification, okay. But that's really the only way to forestall it. The land has to be bought up and controlled by an entity that has the purpose of deeding it, conveying it back for affordable housing. And there's only one instance that I'm aware of that happening really in this state, and perhaps even in this country. There are redevelopment authorities in other cities, like San Antonio has always been very active, and they've banked land. But I don't know of another city where a nonprofit like a TERS has been as active in buying land and banking it. And that's just what has to happen, in my view. There may be, I'm sure there are other mechanisms, but I think that's the most effective. There's a hand back here.
That presupposes effective government oversight, which simply doesn't happen in this city. The Chronicle has repeatedly demonstrated that the city misuses its housing money. It doesn't oversee properly the affordability requirements baked into these LARAs. It's simply not happening.
What is the answer to that? People have to get active. They have to get away. I wish this room were overflowing with people. I really do. I told everybody I knew. People got to get active. Yeah.
I think one of the issues also is that oftentimes the people who are active are the people who are already in power or who are in the affluent areas, right? There was recently the affordable housing development that was going to be placed over in the Galleria area, right? And for the most part, the people who are active in saying, no, we don't want that, were all the rich people who lived in that area, right? And then when they said, oh, we don't want it there because they're going to overflow our schools and we don't have the infrastructure in place, they said, you should put it back where the people who are going to look like that live, right? And then in that case, then if that happens, right, they say, why should we have to deal with these same issues if you're not going to deal with the same issues? And there has to be sort of a coalescence of community across these boundaries of socio-political,
I wholeheartedly agree with that.
And so I think there's really an issue where if we say that we're not able to politicize our groups of people, if you can't politicize the people who are living in these areas, then nobody's going to do anything because they're the only ones who are able to do that.
Well, but low moderate income people aren't completely powerless. I have a lot of work where I have community meetings and we have overflow crowds in the room sometimes. And if you look at HISD, those meetings overflow crowds, and they were able to get a decision about the acting superintendent redacted. So people aren't really powerless. They just have to be focused, and it has to be something that they can really wrap their arms around an issue. If it's an issue, now, housing is one of those issues. I think I've always felt like one of the problems we have in Houston is that we're so spread out that it's really hard to get people to coalesce. Now, when I do a neighborhood plan, like the city has an ordinance that's designed to keep this thing from happening where you've got townhomes being built in a single family neighborhood. I forget what it's called. My friend back here is the zero lot line thing. Well, it's really hard. That ordinance is written in such a way that's really difficult because you got to get a majority of the people, and everybody feels like, well, if they hang on to their piece of land, they may be able to sell it for $100 a square foot. That is, we do have a cultural issue in Houston with respect to people feeling that way. But that zero lot line thing is one example in one of the plans that I just recently did, where I said the people in Museum Park and the people in the Palm Center subdivisions need to come together, for example, and coalesce around these issues that are common issues for everybody. Not enough of that happens. And I think in large part it is because we are 600 square miles. It's just, we're all over the place. It's probably easier. Chicago has always been a city that's had a lot more community organizing than any Texas city has had. Well, Chicago is very compact, very densely settled. And when I grew up here, I didn't even know the people at the other high schools because there were 12 of them maybe. We were all over the place. And I think that has a lot to do with why it's really difficult to organize communities in Houston. But I'm open to other theories. If there are other people who have other ideas about this, I don't pretend to have all the answers. But I do think we do have a cultural issue here around laissez-faire. When I was working for the plan, when I first started, it was the whole laissez-faire thing. It was anti-zoning. When the zoning has been up for 4 times now, right? Well, the Black community has been as opposed to zoning, and so has the Latino community, as has the Anglo community. Because we have this culture of independence, and I want to do, what I want to do with my land. this guy on the screen isn't the only one who feels that way about this. It's this whole private property thing that we have kind of gets in our way. But again, this is just my little personal theory of it. There may be others in the audience who have a different theory about it. But it's really hard to get people. I had a project in Kansas City, Missouri one time. I was astounded at how the people coordinated among each other and coalesced, and I went, oh my gosh, doesn't this happen in Houston? Well, again, it's a relatively small geography. And I guess
We have a question
that's
here
a
in the back.
theory.
I found it not shocking, surprising that the planning director in the 1970s didn't really have a clear definition of what his title was. Do you think that that's actually changed now? And what do you think that mission statement is for the current planning department?
I don't think that's a fair question to ask a consultant.
This one.
Well, I'll tackle it though. I mean, I'm getting ready to be 70. I'm going to retire soon. But I will say that I do think that has certainly changed in 45 years, right? That was maybe 45 years or so ago. It really has changed. The planning director does have a different conception of his role. There is a general plan. It's not what I would consider to be the best general plan. Yeah, that is snickering back there. But there was an attempt to have a general plan done. So there has been some progress made with respect. But I don't think it's really fair to blame any planning director, because any planning director is operating in a culture where developers pretty much rule. I'm just gonna stick my neck out and say that.
Let's probably
So.
have time for 2 more questions. Yeah, so
Okay.
here in the middle, and then I saw a hand way in the back after. Or
I
sorry.
don't really have a question as much as a comment. About 12 years ago, I was part of a group that we were trying to stop a development in the Heights, my neighborhood. And we observed what happened to a thing called Center City down in the medical center. Planning director is not, it doesn't matter. There's a thing called the Planning Commission. And in Center City, Nabisco had been sold to the Texas Medical Center, which is a private entity. It sounds like a public space, but it's not. It's actually a private corporation. And the Texas Medical Center wanted to put a parking garage in the middle of Center City. And the community fought like hell. And the Planning Commission rolled over, yielded to the attorney for the Texas Medical Center, and that community began to fall apart.
Okay, was it back there or?
Yeah, all the way in the back.
So,
If you
Please
could
stand
stand up, thank you.
I have a question about like these ways of developing downtown and midtown. It feels like a lot of that is set to appeal to like people like me, younger people, educated. But what about like the homeless community that was in downtown and they got pushed out to midtown, now it's under 59, and they got cleared and was the fourth largest city in this country, but we only have 3 homeless shelters. So it's like, while these land trusts are occurring, are they for people like me that are kind of downwardly mobile because of student loan debt, or like how does the bottom fare in that?
I mean, the issue is that none of these land trusts have actually done anything yet, right? Like Lara, for instance, they have a lot of land and they build things, but they're building single-family residences, which are the opposite of the future, right? And they continue to build single-family residences. I mean, the city, in association, as part of the AIA, I shouldn't be saying this, but the AIA in the city of Houston recently did a competition looking for an affordable housing option. And they said, the future of affordable housing is single-family residences, which I think is absolutely nuts, right? And to your point about lot sizes, minimum lot sizes, personally, I don't think that minimum lot sizes are necessarily something that needs to be, should be put into place, because I think that means that you're never going to get the housing needs that our communities actually have to have in order to support themselves, because not everybody needs to live in a single family house, right? You know, we're currently on this trend towards bigger means better, right? But in fact, you know, people are more than comfortable living in much smaller housing, right? The scale of a single family residence has probably doubled in the last 50 years, right? And so, do we suddenly need an extra 1,200 square feet per person? Probably not. And so and I totally understand the reasoning behind minimum lot sizes as a method to stop, you know, these townhome developments. But it's what's also stopping the ability to evolve the system in which we produce affordable housing in these neighborhoods that actually need it, rather than continually forcing it further and further out to the areas that haven't coalesced these minimum lot sizes.
Well, actually, it's such a weak tool that it really isn't having a big effect. Okay, and there are neighborhoods that are deed-restricted single-family neighborhoods that would like to retain that character. So there's two sides to that coin. The other thing is that the Midtown Redevelopment Authority lots that have been purchased in the Third Ward have been purchased for the sake of building rental housing, because the Midtown Redevelopment Authority understands that some people are just not going to ever be able to afford to buy a home. And so there's 1 million square feet of land that's been purchased in the Third Ward for the purpose of building rental housing. So that is happening.
I'm sorry, we have to, although one person in front had her hand up for a little while, so last question.
To come back to the film, to Invisible City, and if it is deja vu all over again, wouldn't this be an effective film to show as widely as possible? Because sitting here, I was depressed about the issues that,
yes,
you know, as you say, you just changed the hairstyles and,
yep.
And so I know there are copyright issues and
No.
and if
Yes,
this
I
could be readily identified.
Let me say something about that if I can. And in context, we should have given at the beginning. Were 6 episodes of The Invisible City. They're all online on YouTube, thanks to the University of Oregon James Blue Archive that put them up. So look them up. This was a different. Episode 6 is a kind of an epilogue. It's different than the first 5 episodes, which are more the actual broadcast that happened each week, okay? For this 6th episode, James Blue, as you can see, this is a very edited episode, pulling out highlights and weaving them together. It's different than the others, but it was the one we chose to show because it's the summary program. But I recommend people see all 5 and also encourage people to access them. They're readily available.
Yes.
Because it just seems
Yes.
like such a critical synthesis of the issues from all sides, government, private, and that some kind of campaign to make it available.
And I'd also point out that there's another series that was also produced by SWAT, the Southwest Alternate Media Project, at the very beginning when James Blue was involved. It's called Who Killed Fourth Ward?
Yeah.
And another film, again, related housing issues at the time, that is still relevant, extremely relevant.
Yeah.
So thank you all. And Roberta, thank you so much.
I'll never get another contract.